PowerShell Snapins for SharePoint 2010. Essentially, I'm actually running a presentation that Ted Patterson wrote with regards to this. So hopefully I've got enough information from Ted to kind of run through it with you guys. Essentially, we've got a lot of demo content within the presentation that we've got coming up, so it's quite hands-on. What we're going to quickly do is run through some of the fundamentals of PowerShell, just the basics with no SharePoint involved at all. Then we're going to look at the new 2010 SharePoint PowerShell Snapins and how they work, how they can be loaded into a PowerShell window, and how you guys can start using those and actually loading those up into scripts. And then we're going to have a look at extending that a bit further by using Visual Studio and actually creating our own PowerShell Snapins. Just a quick question for you guys. How many of you guys have been using PowerShell in SharePoint 2007? So a few of you, which is good. It's good. So what we'll do is we'll start off with this fundamentals, start going through for those guys that haven't used PowerShell so much before. So what is PowerShell? PowerShell is a replacement for the DOS prompt. It's a brand new powerful tool that, well, I'll say brand new, it's been with us now for about 4 years. Essentially, what it allows you to do is create objects in memory, much as if you were using something in Visual Studio, but you can then manipulate those objects whilst in a command prompt. There's a set of commandlets. These are functions within PowerShell, so these are the ways that actually you produce functionality. And there's a set that comes with PowerShell out of the box, and there's the ability to actually use something called pipelining, where you actually pipe a set of commands from one commandlet to the next set of commandlets. And what we'll do is we'll have a quick look at how this works. There's also this provider model, so you can write your own snap-ins for PowerShell, load those into a PowerShell window, and just start using the commandlets in this way. So what we've got here, this is actually a PowerShell window. So what we're looking at currently is just a set of commands. And what we can see within here is we've got a single command up at the top, get PS provider. And what we're doing is we're then going down, if we take it down one level, we're then piping that into a separate commandlet. So we've got where object, and then we're just using a little bit of logic around that, where name is like F, and then we can actually put in a wildcard operator in there. So, and we can then move that further down. So we can actually pipe commands and then pipeline off onto the next set of commands as well. So we can add in formatting instructions within here. And just like good old DOS as well, you can also output to text files. So if you actually wanted to go through, generate a text file from this, what we'll do is in some of the demos is I'll go through the new SharePoint PowerShell Snapins. I'll show how you can actually output the content of all of the new Snapins from that namespace. And then you can obviously just go through, use a normal text editor, go off and find commands. So how can you author PowerShell scripts? Well, anybody can author PowerShell scripts. It's just a normal scripting environment. Anything with a PS1 extension can be run by PowerShell. So that's seen as just like a batch file within DOS. You can actually use that as an execution. There is a key differentiator from DOS to PowerShell. That is that there's something called an execution policy. Because of the power of PowerShell, the initial developers actually restricted what could be done with it. So out of the box, when you first install PowerShell, what you end up with is a cut-down version that cannot run any scripts at all. And new to PowerShell 2.0 is actually part of the system management framework, I believe now. But within Windows PowerShell 2.0 is there's this integrated scripting environment. So there were various other products that provided some of this before, but now PowerShell comes out the box with this ability. So you've got IntelliSense, color coding, and you've got the ability to go off and debug scripts against this. So we just come in and actually start having a look at kind of generating some of our own scripts. Let's bring up a demo. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to open up the PowerShell ISE. So this is the integrated scripting environment for PowerShell. So when I was talking about execution policies, so what you'll find with a lot of PowerShell commandlets is that they're prefixed. So for instance, you'll be able to get set information there'll be a new operator, and we'll have a look at that in some of the Visual Studio demos coming up later on. So if I do get, we can actually tab through the commandlets that are available to us. So what I've actually done is just done get-e and use the tab key. In fact, I guess you guys can't see that very well. Is that easier to see at the back now? Cool. Let's get this up a bit larger as well. So what we've got is we've got get execution policy. So if I now select this, we can actually see that there's remote signed against this. There's various different elements you can have. So you can have this as unrestricted or restricted. Restricted means that you can't run any scripts at all. Basically, this means that when your IT pros come in, they can sit there and go, well, we're going to run these scripts at this level, and then once we've finished running the scripts to configure our environment, do whatever we need to do, we're then going to lock that down again. Okay, just going to come over to another ISE window that I've actually already set up with some command lines in. Let's just see what we've got in here. So, as we were having a look before, again, I'll just increase the side of this for you guys out the back. There we go. And we can start to see how we can use these commands. So we've got get PS provider, and we can see what's loaded in within here. And then we can pipe this out. So now what we're doing is we're actually piping out the output of get PS provider to a where object commandlet, and then we're taking the name operator and we're asking it for anything like F or F star with the wildcard associated with it, and we can then start to actually bring back just a subset of that list. And again, there's more elements that we can do within here. So I'll pipe this out to format list. Should be able to do that. Again, I just use tab there so that you can actually auto-complete some of these elements for you, so that we can now generate a list from what we've got and seen. So we're just looking at the pipelining within PowerShell natively at the moment. Okay, we come back to the presentation deck. Okay, so just kind of a quick run through there for you guys so that you can actually, if you haven't seen PowerShell before, just have a quick kind of heads up against what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation. So then within 2010, what we now have are these new SharePoint PowerShell add-ins. Essentially, these are going to eventually, I believe, replace some of the STS ADM commands. There's a very, very similar syntax being used with this, but you've got all the richness of PowerShell being able to provide back objects. We'll have a look at that shortly. So what we can actually do is we can explicitly load the SharePoint PowerShell Snapins from any PowerShell window as long as it's on the server that has SharePoint installed, or Windows 7 for that matter, or Vista. But essentially what we've got is that if you want to actually get to these PS Snapins without having to run this command, add PS Snapins Microsoft.SharePoint.PowerShell, out of the box, when you get it installed, there's the management tool link available, so we can actually go into the management tool, and that will load this Snapin for us so that we can start to use the commandlets that are available there. So this is actually looking at utilizing the this is looking at using the PS1 scripting environment so that we can actually use some of the commandlets available within these PS Snapin files for SharePoint. And what we're going to do within the next demo is just go through how we can actually utilize these objects and start to put those into a script. So if I just clear screen against this, so what we've got here, if I just come back, so I've actually got the ability to generate an object. Now I've already done it within here, so let's just create a new site. So we're actually calling out to a commandlet here, new SP site, and we're specifying a URL. I'm just going to change that. Let's call that finance2 for now. Keep the owner radius the same. the name's finance 2. And if we now hit enter, what we can now see is this black line shows us that's completed and there's no red text telling us that there's an error. What we should now have is an object in memory. And this is actually an SP site object, so that in PowerShell, much like we do in Visual Studio, is we're returning that object and then we can set up additional properties against it. So for instance, if you're looking at it from an STS EDM point of view, you'd have to set up the site and then maybe go off and do manual configuration against that, create a feature receiver that would then go off and do that additional configuration. You can do that within PowerShell now so that you don't have to create any more C# code just for doing the configuration of your sites. What I've also got here, these are actually some scripts that we were using in 2007. This is really using just the native object model that's available to us. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to show you this as well. So if I just open up just a normal PowerShell window, so even without the PS Snapins, you've got the ability to actually load an object within PowerShell. So what I'm going to quickly do, that won't work very well, will it? Thank you. There we go. And again, I'm using tab here, so I'm using the PowerShell syntax to actually define the method. And within this, I can then start to tab through the available methods for that object. So I can use something called load with partial name. So I'm just loading the normal Microsoft.SharePoint namespace here, and that's then loaded into memory, and we can then do elements like this. So I'm specifying a new object. We then need to specify the type of object. So I'm just specifying an SP site object and defining the URL that that's at. Okay. And again, what we can now do is start to see that we've got access to all the attributes and properties against this object. And we can also create a web object. So we've now opened the root web against this site. And again, we have all the properties available to us. Okay, just coming back to the slides again. So those are the things that we've natively got available to us. And then what we want to look at is how that we go off and actually extend this within Visual Studio. So we've got the ability to actually, using the provider model, develop additional commands. So as Ted's pointed out within his deck here, is STS ADM extensions are now considered deprecated. So really, if you want to be adding additional functions for your IT pros to use, we want to be looking at doing it this way. So what we've got here is just some examples of some code. And when we get into the demo next, what I'll do is I'll actually take you through this solution, having a look at some of the properties we've got set in there, how we actually go off and define that we want to load this Snapin, how we're going to actually go off and install it, because there's some elements around that that are a little bit tricky. Okay. Oop. Sorry about that. So we're just going to go through, start looking at creating custom Snapins within Visual Studio, looking at the namespaces that we've got to use in order to do that, and additionally some of the stuff that the SharePoint product team has given us with regards to this to make it easier for us. Okay, so I'm just going, this is the project that we were just looking at, and what I'm just going to quickly do is just run you through some of the project settings. So if I go into the properties here. So what we've got a build event which will actually run this install.batch file. So if we just quickly open the install.bat, and actually what we're doing is we're specifying two commands. One is the GAC util to actually put the DLL within the GAC for us, and the other element is the install util, which will actually go off and install that so that it's available for us to use. I'll now come back to the properties of the solution. Okay, and if we now have a look at what we've got against debug. So we've actually specified that we're going to start an external program, which in this case is PowerShell. Additionally, what we've got is some command line arguments. So if you actually run just a normal PowerShell window and use this -ps console file, you can define one of these PSC1 files. Let's just have a quick look at what we've got within here. So this is just some XML markup, and we're actually specifying what the Snapin name is, so that we'll actually go and load that from the namespace, so that's why it's got to be loaded into the GAC first. When we're actually running the install as well, it's actually this file that needs to be run. One bug that we've actually got at the moment, so if I actually open this up in Designer, we can't see anything. That is just part of it currently. I don't know what's going to happen with that, whether we're going to get a better UI into it. However, you can just go into code view for that. So this is just actually running the installer. So when we actually use the install util, this will actually be running through and generating the availability of that PS Snapin for us to be used within our PowerShell windows. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to open up the appropriate Hello World application, synonymous with pretty much every single development demonstration I've ever seen. What we've got here is, if we actually go up to the top, we can see the system.management.automation namespace. This is actually the element that we need to have to start using these PS1 Snapins and actually extending PowerShell. Within this namespace, we've got the commandlet object, and we've got this verbs common. Essentially, when you start having a look at some of those PowerShell commandlets that we're using first, we'd usually prefix those. So we'd have get, set, new. These are all available, and what we've got is part of here is we can actually define that, and then the object will define the hyphen for us, and then all we then need to do is specify the name that we then want to call. So this is all kind of out-of-the-box PowerShell. So what I'm quickly going to do is I'm just going to run the debugger against this. Right. So take that off. Again, the tab interface into this, that's native within PowerShell. So all I'm now running is get hello world info, and what we should now see is that we have a begin processing method that we've overridden, a process record method we've overridden, and the end processing record we've overridden. We should then see that right out to the PowerShell window. So that's all nice and easy. However, the SharePoint product team, as I've been saying, they've been quite nice to us. And what they've done is they've actually provided another set of base classes that we can start to use when we're talking to SharePoint. So we've got these additional classes that we can inherit from. So in here, we've got sp-get commandlet base, and then we can actually define what type of object we're going to be using with this. So here we've got a IEnumerable, so that we can actually run through this collection, in this case the array. And what I'll then do is I'll just run this again within our PowerShell window. So again, we can see from the top here, this is where we've got verbs common. We're defining the get, and then we're using sp hello world info. And as we can see, we can actually see that actually outputting on screen. So that's all well and good, but we haven't really done a lot with SharePoint at this point. So let's start having a look at some of the things that we can do when we call the SharePoint object model. Okay, so what we've got here is we've now got the system.management.automation namespace, but we've also got our PowerShell namespaces in here as well. So what we're now going to do is, again, we're going to run this command. So we're now defining get SP wingtip sites. But what we're actually doing is we're actually defining in the SP get commandlet base is that we're going to return a collection of SP site objects, which oddly enough is what that is. So in the web application.site, it's the collection of the SP sites. We then generate that, and we have this retrieve data objects, which allows us just to iterate over the sites that we've got available within this web application. Okay, so we've now actually outputted to the screen all of these SP site objects, the details, the properties are actually configured against each of these. What we're now going to do is say, well, actually, that's not particularly useful to us, and if you're an IT pro, that's probably not going to be helpful at all. So what we want to do is look at doing some data manipulation against these. So what we've now got is this command here, where we're actually defining a separate class. So we've got a new class, SP site light, and essentially what we're going to do is actually define how we want to actually generate these sites. So we're going to pass in a standard SP site object, and what we're going to do is we're just going to pull out some of the properties of that. So we're going to pull out the root web title. We're going to have a look at the storage allocation that's been used against this, do some string formatting against that, and then what we're going to do is also output the URL against it. And all we're doing here is that actually within the commandlet itself that we've got defined is we're defining the collection as SP site light, and then what we're doing is again iterating through the sites within the web app, but passing to our class the SP site object and returning an SP site light object. So we're now going to run the concise commandlet, and we've now got new formatting approach around that so that we can actually see what the site title is of each one of the root webs. We can see the actual allocation that has been used there, and we can actually see the URL. So again, we still haven't done a hell of a lot with the object model. We've gone off and got some information, but what about going and setting information and creating new sites? So what we've got here is we've got a create wingtip sites class. So here what we'll find is that where we've got the commandlet objects here is we've changed now. So we're still using the system.automation namespace here, but what we've got is verbs column new. So we've defined it that we're going to want to create a new, and then we've defined our name for create wingtip site. We've also got some parameters on here, so we can actually start passing in some parameters to this commandlet. And we've got some quite nice elements within here. So we've kind of got the parameter area. We can see that it's mandatory, so somebody has to fill in this particular has to fill in this particular property. We can see that it's value from pipeline, so it's actually going to be from the context of the PowerShell window that we actually want to be able to be passing into this string. Then what we've got is we've got this new object here, which is create data object, and we're again overriding that from the SharePoint commandlet namespace. So what we then generate is a brand new site based on this site name that we've specified. So just to go through this, So what we've now done is said new SP create wingtip site. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to specify the parameter in this case. Actually, what it will do is say that you haven't specified a parameter. We have to do nothing for that. That's just via the nature of having this parameter element as being set to mandatory as true. So I'm going to define a name for this. So we'll do sales 2009. So what we've now generated is we've actually generated a new object, and we can see that that's actually been returned and outputted to the screen as well. So what we should now be able to do, so if I open up a browser window, so we're in sales 2008 here. What I'm just going to do is change this to sales 2009. Let's just do a quick refresh. I don't want to kid anyone here. Yeah, that is working. That's fine. Okay. Additionally, what we've got here is that we can actually see within the site that we've generated is we've got a wingtip tasks task list that's already been generated here. Now, what we can actually see in the code is that this task list has been generated by this set of functionality within the method. What we can start to do is actually generate new lists, create new subsites at this level. Obviously, we've got the power of the whole SharePoint object model that we can then utilize against this. So what I'm going to quickly do, so I'm just going to stop debugging this for a second. And we're just going to go off and add in a new list. One thing I have found with this demo, by the way, is I don't have any debugging functionality at the moment. So I've either got to be very good or this won't look very good. So we're just creating a custom list here. Don't really care about the description at the moment. Let's create a document library. And then again, what we'll do is we'll return this list and we'll set up some additional properties. So we're going to set allow content types to true. Allow deletion equals false. And what we'll do is we'll just do a quick update against that and hope it works. Read only, one sec. That's it. Okay. We're now going to build this. Oh, I know what that is. 1 second. What I did was I actually loaded this up earlier on, so it's actually in memory within actually one of these ISE windows. So I'm now just going to shut this. Note that. So now see we've got build succeeded, and what I'm just going to quickly do is I'm just going to run debugger against this again so that we actually open up PowerShell, load in our Snapin for us. So okay, and this time what we're going to do is we're actually going to specify our property in here. And again, I use tab there, so actually we can actually tab through, generate the site name. So I'm just going to specify a name here. I'm feeling particularly boring this morning, so we'll go for sales 2010. Okay, so that's completed. Fortunately, it didn't bomb. So now let's go and have a look and see if we've got a sales 2010 site and we've got a doc library created within there with the relevant properties set. (2010). New custom list, so we can actually see that that's actually been generated. And what we'll do is we're going to have a look at the settings against this list. Okay, so what we should see is content types are enabled, which aren't out of the box, and additionally we shouldn't be able to delete it, which has been removed. And that's all done from a PS Snapin, obviously using the power of the SharePoint object model. What we're now going to do is obviously start to talk about some of those objects within the SharePoint namespace. So that's the Microsoft.SharePoint.PowerShell namespace. I'm just going to open those up in Reflector so that you can actually have a look at some of those objects. Okay, I loaded this in earlier on just so that we can get to it pretty quickly. But let's just open this up. So what we should be able to see is there's SP commandlet objects within here. And where we've got those, what we should be able to do is be able to use them. So there's commandlet attributes within here. We've got a commandlet exception that we can catch. A vast array of commandlets that come out of the box within here that we can start to utilize within our code. So I'm aware that I've gone really quick through this presentation, and it's the first time I've done it, so I'm going to be really stupid now and open up the audience and say, what do you want to see as code up front here? And actually be able to kind of like start doing some of this stuff, maybe create a new commandlet and go through that entire process. Any takers? No. With a different master page? Okay. So should we go through the process, kind of create a new class, actually sort of start adding this stuff in? Might be a bit of copy and pasting going on, but you know, hopefully we'll get there. Just add a class. So we want a new site with a new master page, yeah? So we're just using this system.management.automation namespace, and then what we'll do is we'll add in standard.microsoft.sharepoint, and using .sharepoint.administration. Okay. So we've already got a lot of the code for some of this here. So what I'm quickly going to do is actually grab this stuff here so that we don't have to do it all again. Oh. Right. This is actually quite a cool feature as well. So within the SP commandlet area, let's just go off. I'm obviously missing the .PowerShell namespace. So that should now come in, he says. What we also have is this requires the use of farm admin. So essentially there's a property that we can set against here so that if they don't have farm admin privileges when they're actually trying to run the commandlet, then that will actually return an error for us. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what we've got now is we just need site name. What's that complaining about? Okay, one sec. Let's just change this. Okay, that's cool. Right, so you also now want to go off and we want to define the master page that's associated with this. So what we want to do, anybody remember a custom master page off the top of their head that we can define? Might have to spell that out for me, Chris, but if we can do that, that's great. B4 minimal.master. Oh, V4. Right, okay. Pull that out. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just get an SP web object here. I'm not too concerned at the moment about memory leaks to my code because we're not going to be doing too much with this, but obviously you normally want to wrap this stuff in a using statement or dispose of the objects afterwards. Okay. Okay, so do web dot URL equals, and come off the top of your head, it's underscore catalogs master pages, isn't it? Yeah. Shouldn't matter in this particular instance because I don't think we're using a publishing page, but let's just see what we do anyway. Equals. Get web update against that. Okay. Thanks, Chris. cool. And then what we'll do is we'll go to this. I've just got to check how we're going to return it as this. Just need to return the site, okay. That's cool. Right, let's try it. So that's all built. One thing, tell you what we will do is we'll change the name of what we've got here because that could be a bit confusing. Build that. And what we'll now do is start debugging against that. Okay, good root, clear that. So new SP, new site with master. We've still got the same property. So again, we tab all the way through this. Let's give that a name. We're sometime in the future now, so that's going to be 2011. Exactly. Just got a gentleman in the front giving me the fingers crossed, so let's hope. Ooh. Invalid URL. Sites, I bet it's relative to the application, so I wonder if we need in that, or we either need the preceding /
Try the preceding / don't, you could possibly need a token.
Just can't change vastly. If not, I've got some code that already does this for 2007. I don't think these properties have updated, so that we have a way around this if not. So let's just try that first. Build that. And we'll do a quick debug against that. Okay. Site name, and we'll do sales 2012. Good time to be in London. It's the Olympics on. Well, that's loading as well. I just thought there are some other things we can show in here. So I'm just going to open up a new PowerShell window. Oh, we have a return anyway, so hopefully if we go to the site, we'll actually be able to see something. So if we just change this URL here. Sales, yes, thank you. File not found.
I've got a theory. I think maybe that master page doesn't get provisioned in the template you're using.
Okay.
Use CMS publishing hash.
0, what? Yeah. Is it 0 or 1? 1, isn't it? I'll tell you what, we'll find out. Okay, so everybody knows this location: program files, common files, Microsoft shared. Web server extensions 14 now, though. Okay, let's just go and have a quick look in here. So what are we looking for? Site templates. CMS publishing. Oh, no. Can I drag it straight into here? No, it's not letting me. In here. Actually, no, it's defined against the web temp what I'm doing. It isn't there. Should we go for the minimal master? Is it just V4 minimal master, yeah?
Well, that might be provision in that side. They don't provision everything in every side.
No.
I think CMS publishing actually should be what you want.
Ah, let's give it a go. It's already broken, so it can't get any worse, yeah? Okay, cool. Let's build that. Well, that's building, so that's already built. I'm just going to quickly debug that. So just a quick F5. Okay, so we'll just quickly come back to here. What I was going to just quickly show you in here is the add PS Snapin command. CMD. Oh. There we go. So you can do add PS Snapin. You can actually use this from any PowerShell window. So this is the ability to go and add new ones of these Snapins. So what we're doing currently is creating a new Snapin. So I'm just going to quickly go off and add in the SharePoint Snapin, SharePoint.PowerShell. I'm not sure if it's case sensitive, but let's just make sure. Ooh, that's interesting. That tends to suggest I'm running a 32-bit version for that because it can't find the farm object. Let's try that again. So we do add PS Snapin. What is it? SharePoint. That's interesting. That should be able to just go through and log into that. I'll have to have a look at that one, but essentially on any PowerShell window, if we quickly just run back into and go to PowerShell against here, SharePoint. What we've got is this management shell here, and this is actually what will load it automatically for you, so you won't have to do that. Although there does seem to be a problem with my farm in general at the moment now. Chris is taking responsibility, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully what we should have now is this has come back, and let's just, so it's created a site. I mean, if it couldn't find publishing 0, then obviously that wouldn't have worked. So let's quickly go over to here, try 2013. No. Designer can be your friend. Yeah, master page, singular. Thank you very much. And we'll give this one final try, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we will actually see something coming through this time. Okay, so I did build that, but I'll just do it quickly. F5. So if I, this is the one that I'm saying I've got an issue with. So if I do get sp, so it is actually loading the command that's in here. Let's just quickly go to that ISE window again. So there's obviously something odd going on here. But if I again do it here, this is the window that I actually use the add ps snapin command to actually add in here. So if I just do, so it is actually loading it. It's something else that's going on. Okay. Let's see if this has come back yet. No, that's still going. Okay, let's just check this one more time. So if this hasn't worked, we'll call it a day there, and then I'll take questions, but fingers crossed, eh? Anyway, questions, anyone? Sorry about that. I was hoping that it would run a little bit longer than normal demos, but yeah, it did take a bit of a risk there. But yeah, hopefully, though, you can still see the power of this, how it can be extended using just the power of the SharePoint object model. You can go off, define exactly what you want to do within PowerShell, and give this to your IT pros so that they can go off and manage their infrastructure effectively. So if you guys have got any questions, I'm quite happy to take those. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there probably would be ways of doing that so that you can actually sit there and tell it's running. You probably have to run a additional process that would then be, an additional method or additional class that would then be monitoring that, and then kind of just using write host to output to PowerShell. So there probably would be ways to do that if you wanted to do it. So the power of kind of writing your PS1 files allows you to do that. So you can define your configuration. A lot of the stuff that I was doing in SharePoint 2007 around PowerShell uses XML. So you define an XML structure which would have your configuration in. And then there's the ability inbuilt within PowerShell to actually read XML files. So you can actually go through that process and define a configuration and sit there and say, these are my parameters I want to add here. I think you were next, sorry.
How would you default to loading certain
So you can do that. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. There's a way of actually setting it to run up where you'll load the default Snapins. So for instance, if you set a new set of Snapins, you can just load those every time. It's minus ps config file. If you run that up with PowerShell, then it'll actually add those files in. So you could almost run it from a batch file, which had all of those in, and then opened up PowerShell to actually be configured appropriately. Yeah. Add new verbs. I haven't looked into that, to be fair. It's a good question. Potentially, because I know it's actually just a string value so it's actually just an enumeration that you've got against it. You might just be able to kind of add in a string value there, and then add in the other value, and then the hyphen gets put together. I'd have to test that, though. So if you wanted to give it a go, it'd be pretty quick to find out, I'm guessing. Yes, sir. On the code for the custom ones, could you do it against 2007? Sorry, the custom code around what we did here? Yeah. Well, for creating sites, definitely. So, I mean, that's just out-of-the-box SharePoint namespaces that we were utilizing there. It's really the system.management.automation namespace and the Microsoft.SharePoint.PowerShell namespace that gives us the links into PowerShell, and that's where we're using some of those commandlet properties. So, yeah, you can definitely do that within the SharePoint object. Chris?
Great demo. So, if I understand right, commandlets are effectively an abstraction of PowerShell. So, you can kind of batch up some of the logic in C#, and it makes it simpler for consumers of the script, the commandlet to use. Yeah?
Exactly.
Okay. Is there any kind of official forum or anything? Because obviously the community are going to develop more and more commandlets. Is there any kind of good distribution? What is the recommendation for getting those used publicly?
I haven't seen any as yet. It's a fantastic question. Certainly one that I think people could take up. It'd be a great way of doing it, where we actually, set up a Codeplex site that we can start adding in code in here and sort of sitting there going, I've already done this, guys. If you want to come, take it, extend it, add new ones to it. So I think that's a great way of looking at it, and yeah, possibly something we need to look into.
Because whenever there's a list of things that Microsoft provide, you can never hope that every last single thing is in there. So I think if there's the community of people here can add to something central, but it's only one of those things, then maybe that's a good idea.
So you mean from a Microsoft standpoint then, or do you mean actually at a community level?
Just rather than everybody publishing it on their blog.
Yeah.
To make these things easy to find, almost in a pseudo marketplace kind of way.
The commandlet store. Okay. Yeah, no, it's definitely a fantastic idea. So we could have a look at setting this up. Maybe we'll look at using something like Codeplex or Code Gallery, and maybe allow lots of people to come in and contribute against that. Obviously quite powerful. What I'm going to do is I'm now going to take off the error page against here and just come back to the presentation. Thank you very much for your time today, guys. Hope you have a good rest of the day, and I hope you had a fantastic conference. Cheers.